We're clear for takeoff.
Welcome one and all to the Kings of the Heart podcast. Kings of the Heart right here. My name is Tariiq Walton. I am a licensed clinical marriage and family therapist, and I am not by myself because this is the Kings of the Heart, which means there is another king, the one, the only, my brother, Dr. John Hart is in the house. Dr. Hart, brother John.
Hey.
What is happening, man?
Oh, man, so good to be here in this
space. Good to see
again.
you, man. Good to see you.
Man, I know. It's been a while, but, it's flu season, it's life, so back to good health and,
yes,
just here rocking again with Kings of the Heart, man.
Yeah.
I appreciate you holding it down, homie.
Hey, man,
say that.
This is what we do, man. This is exactly what we do. We are the Kings of the Heart. We have to make sure that we are getting this information out to people, no matter what's going on out there in the world. But look, man, it's always good to have you back here with us, man.
Appreciate it.
The other king right here, Dr. John.
I'm back.
Yeah, man.
Y'all get ready. Buckle up.
And we've been having some great discussions, part ones, part twos, about a lot of good topics. I don't know. This one might be another two-parter, but
possibly.
We'll see. Let's see how far we get on this one, man.
Right. Let's see.
So let me tell you, it seems a lot of my clients are dealing with this particular issue. And we're going to get deeper into it, some other things I've been seeing around this in other settings, but this one particular thing keeps coming up over and over and over again. Issues around forgiveness.
Yeah.
Forgiveness. What it looks like, why we're stuck in certain areas and have a hard time forgiving. I just keep seeing, you got people who have never, and they acknowledge they've never forgiven anybody, and they recognize how problematic that is. So I want to kind of break that down. What is forgiveness? Why is it so hard to forgive? And how can we get on a path of forgiveness? That's something that I really, really believe people need to hear about. So, Dr. John, why don't we just start off right here? How do you define forgiveness? Just give a simple definition of forgiveness, because I think a lot of people don't even know they're not even quite sure of what it means to actually forgive. What is forgiveness?
Yeah, forgiveness to me is the most important word, and the definition that I've become comfortable with is it's the intentional letting go of hurt, resentment. That's it pretty concisely. And I want to emphasize the intentional letting go, because hurt and resentment can stew. It sits with us.
Right.
And so if we don't go to therapy, or we don't intentionally plan and create a process and create a path towards forgiveness, we're not going to be able to do it. We tend not to be able to do it organically. I think it gets talked about as if people wake up one day and they have forgiven. Not really. The operative word here is going to have to be it's the intentional part, right? Yeah. Like what is it that's still what needs are still damaged, unmet, for there to be that hurt and resentment, right? So the action, the behavior has happened. Something has happened. And people are stewing, people are processing, people are hurting and suffering. And so the same way that we have to manage our primary emotions to be very intentional about how we regulate, there goes that word. Right. It's in the same vein with forgiveness. You have to be intentional. Right. So when you regulate your emotions, right? Because if you think about my definition, I have hurt, I have resentment, right? You got to be intentional to regulate that. Yeah. So there's no reason why we have to be intentional about our process of forgiveness. Now, how we go about it, excuse me, that's a different topic that we'll get into that. Talk about. But I just want to stress, it's intentional, folks. Right. So if you're going to forgive, if you want to forgive, if your desire is to forgive, then you have to be intentional. Right. There is something on your part you have to commit. So I'll stop there, bro. But what about you? How do you conceptualize forgiveness?
You caught that perfectly. You captured that absolutely perfectly. I think the key point, like you said, is the intention behind it. Yeah. It's intentionally deciding no longer to be angry, no longer to be resentful, no longer to allow that hurt to distract you from how you are interacting or engaging with that person or whoever that object of hurt is, right? It's being intentional about it, letting the anger go. And I think a lot of people don't realize that when they say they've forgiven, they're still holding on to the anger.
Correct.
Right? All that resentment is still there. It's very present. You can see it in the way that they talk about the person, how they interact with the person. It's all still very present. And so it's really understanding, you have to decide no longer to be angry. If you're saying that you're forgiving, you're saying that I'm not going to be angry anymore. And we're not saying that happens instantly. There's no expectation that forgiveness happens instantaneously. Right? It's a process. But like Dr. John said, you have to be intentional about going through that process, taking that journey to forgiveness. Right? And there's so many ways that can happen. Like we said, we'll get deeper into that. But it's first understanding what is the definition of forgiveness. And so even going beyond that, we think about how we even get to a place where we no longer forgive, where we're so angry at somebody. What are some of those factors? What are some of the contributing factors that put us in a place where forgiveness even has to be on the table?
I mean, that's a really great question, and I actually think that there's so many different answers to that. I think, I don't know if this is going to directly answer, but what comes to mind is, it's when I think about human behavior, your question elicits that idea of what is at stake. Right. So if there's something that is at stake and at risk to worsen, to create more problems, I think there's a little bit more motivation to forgiving, right? Regardless of what the situation is. So let's say, for example, I've had clients who will say, we have kids together. It's a huge motivational idea for folks to really grapple with, is in order for my kids to experience whatever lifestyle I want, I need to forgive my partner. Because if not, this will destroy the relationship, a la destroy the family and my kid, right? So that's a really good example of what I'm saying, in which there are so many different factors, but I really think that it applies to what people value the most. If people value family and connection, and if that is at risk by not forgiving, they consider it a lot more. If it's other things like money and finances, right? So,
but I'm actually talking more so along the lines of what happens that people don't want to forgive or having a hard time forgiving. Like thinking about the hurt. Like what are the things that actually causes the hurt? What are the things that actually cause the anger that people are having a hard time letting go of, that puts them in a position of not forgiving?
Yeah,
and that could be anything too, right?
Yeah, no, it can. So a couple of things that come to mind when I've worked with clients is, so you have constant and repeated exposure to the stimulus that caused the hurt.
Okay.
Right. So people who keep getting exposed to that person, that situation that has led to the resentment, hurt, and anger, it's going to be really hard. Like that's part of being human, right? So, some people struggle with that, and there's not really a true escape, right? So, for example, if let's say the person who hurt you is a parent, how can you technically really escape your parent if you live with them every day? So that constant reminder builds resentment. So that's one idea. So the constant repeated exposure to the stimulus, to the person that hurt you, that's problematic. The other thing that comes to mind when I think about the factor, but this is just me personally, when I've worked with clients, I think there's also that cognitive distortion around emotional reasoning, right? Okay. It's not to dismiss people's feelings, but we have people out here who, when they feel, they are so justified in that feeling that they want it to be dealt with, addressed all day, every day, right? Because it's my feelings and you did this, so you have to. And there's a certain level without a therapist or a trained person to assist with that, because there's nothing wrong in trying to explore, how do you want to be healed and what does that look like? But emotional reasoning is very dangerous, because what it does is it allows the person to say, my feelings are not just so valid, but my feelings are now at the heart of it. So you have to deal with my resentment. You have to deal with my hurt. And because you caused it, and because you elicited that, like, then I feel justified in putting you through the ringer.
Mm-hmm.
And that's problematic. So the other thing that I think can get easily overlooked is emotional reasoning. And again, it's not to dismiss the emotions of resentment, hurt, and anger, but when people take it to that level, it's now quite irrational in people's behaviors.
Yeah. Yeah. The thing that I think about is that, and the reason why I'm even asking this question is because there are a lot of people who are dealing with being on the other side of that forgiveness, right? Where they're not being forgiven, where they feel or believe that their partner is continuing to bring things up over and over again to show them that they not only have they not forgotten, but they haven't forgiven. They're throwing it at them every time they're being triggered by something that the partner is doing. And for that partner to understand, okay, well, why is it that this keeps happening? Why are you having such a hard time forgiving me? And what you have to often go back to is understanding the degree of the hurt. How major was the infraction that the person is still holding on to whatever actually occurred. And that's the thing that I think a lot of people don't realize, is that you may think that whatever you did wasn't so significant. And like you said, with the emotional reasoning for this, sometimes people take it in as being a little bit more extreme than it actually was. They feel it much more deeply than either the intent or even the actual infraction.
Absolutely.
And it's a matter of recognizing that, there's a certain degree of hurt that the person is actually processing here that's being kind of settled into this feeling of resentment and anger and hurt that they're not able to easily let go of. So when you think about why people can struggle with forgiving, it's often because of how deeply they were hurt or how deeply they believe they were hurt. And we got to break that down too. How deeply they believe they were hurt, and wanting to make sure that the other person recognizes, one, that they should not hurt them that way again. So I keep bringing it up. But two, that sometimes those people who are not so forgiving want the other person, they want the person who is guilty of whatever that hurt is to also feel the pain. And so they're not going to let go.
Yep.
Right. So that's when I start thinking about, okay, well, what's behind this hurt? Well, there are some serious infractions that people struggle with being able to let go of. And not even so, like I said, not let go of the actual infraction. You'll always have the memory of it. Not saying that you should ever forget what happened, because from that you wanted to establish certain boundaries with that person so that you are not hurting that same way again. But to get to that place of forgiveness, which is less about the other person and more about you and how you allow that anger to continue to eat you up, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
No, I mean, you definitely said a lot, and I think you covered a lot. It's not really much for me to add because, and when you were talking, especially in the context of relationships, that's one of the biggest issues is that the perception of the severity of the act gets a lot of couples in trouble.
Right.
So if I'm the one who committed the act, I mean, I don't want to sound this flippantly, but of course I'm going to say and characterize it as, oh, it wasn't that bad. It was just a joke.
Right. I'm going to minimize what
just
happened.
A joke.
Right.
Correct. Right. And so the level of severity for me in this situation is it's low. It's low. It was a joke. Right. I start chalking it up to things, but you're absolutely right. But the person who is on the receiving end of it, it's a completely different experience. And I think both parties, we do this in couples therapy all the time. It's not even to excuse behavior, but it's to walk people through and humanize the other person that, yes, the acts are at the center of it, and we're still dealing with another human being, right? So to want someone to suffer as much as you, well, that you're right, bro. If I'm going to be honest, that says more about you than it does about the other person.
Yeah, for sure.
And that's where people are getting a lot of trouble. Again, forgetting and forgiving, two different things.
Yeah.
Because to me, I'll say that forgetting to me is just another form of repression. You're just putting it off to the side. You're just, but it's there, right? And until you intentionally, there's that word again, until you intentionally.
We love intention around here, man.
Yeah, until you intentionally lean into that and seek individual and, couple support around it, it will probably, and you would agree too, Reek, you will probably suffer more than the other person.
Without a doubt. You definitely will. I want to go back to a point that you were making, emotional reasoning. Can you break that down? Can you define what emotional reasoning is for the audience? I think a lot of people may do this and not realize they're doing it, but what is emotional reasoning?
Yeah. So uh, when I tell my clients about emotional reasoning, I usually tell them, think about a time when you were hurt. Hurt's a good one, and the fact that you were hurt, your thoughts are shaped by how you're feeling, and of course your thoughts impact the way that you're feeling. But what ends up happening with emotional reasoning is, especially in the context of relationships, is that the way people relate to their emotions with emotional reasoning is, because someone has told me and socialized me to believe that my feelings are important, then it's up to me to make sure that other people take my emotions seriously. But unfortunately, people take it to a further extreme.
Hmm.
So yes, if Brother Reek, if I'm hurt because of something you said in a very healthy manner, I come to you, I let you know that, hey, you said something that hurt me, and it's up to me to let you know how we can resolve and reconcile. What emotional reasoning does is the brain cognitively says, you're hurt. You know what? You're justified of being hurt.
Hmm.
And you know what? Your brain is also telling you with emotional reasoning, you better make the world know how hurt you are
Right.
and how deserving you are to feel that hurt. And everybody else has to address your hurt in order for you to get better. And
Right.
do you know why that's a cognitive distortion? It removes accountability for the person to then regulate their emotions,
Yeah.
understand their needs, and advocate. And that's usually that's so that's like my simplified version of what emotional reasoning is.
Yeah.
Like your brain is pushing you to say, there's nothing wrong with you feeling hurt. You know what? The whole world needs to know, and let them know, and put it on them to address everything so that way you can feel better. That causes a lot of problems
Yeah.
in the context of relationships.
You know, when I think about emotional reasoning, and this is how I kind of break it down to my clients too, on top of what you said, is that it's often a misinterpretation of the situation itself, right? So the feelings that
Absolutely.
the feelings that you think that you're experiencing, or that you state that you're experiencing, are usually in excess of what actually occurred, because of the way
Absolutely.
that you're processing the actual situation. Your perspective on what happened, again, and that's what emotional reasoning is. It's a skewed perspective. So
Exactly.
your
Skewed.
perspective
Yeah.
on what is happening is causing you to feel a particular way. And the way that you're experiencing it is based off of whatever that feeling is. And
Right.
this is the problem with emotional reasoning, because it actually um, makes the feeling worse or more intense than the situation. Then now what happens is, as you remember what happened and you think about forgiveness, well, it's harder for you to forgive because of how intense that feeling is. But the feeling itself is out of place for what actually happened. That gets back into the emotional reason, right? It's out of place.
Yeah.
It's in excess. And so now it's so hard for you to forgive because of the way that you're thinking about what happened, that feeling, that hurt, right? And so
Yeah.
it's important for us to realize that everything isn't a hurt. I think about
Yeah.
breakups, right? I think about people who, even say they weren't even in a relationship, people who are just dating. And then all of a sudden somebody says, hey, this isn't working out for me. Oh, I was hurt so much by that. Were you really hurt, or were you disappointed? Were you
Right.
rejected? Right? Are you using the right adjectives? Are you using the right descriptors around what you're really feeling? And because we are so, and this gets back into the emotional regulation and emotional intelligence, we're so simplistic in the way that we're describing what's happening with us and the way that we're feeling, that we're using descriptors of what we're feeling that aren't always accurate. And so
Yeah.
one thing that I come back to with all my clients is that, do you realize how many of your experiences that you're feeling so hurt and that you're angry about are really based in you being disappointed, based on the expectations that you had that weren't met? And so now here you
Right.
are sitting in this, stewing in this disappointment. And yeah, maybe you feel rejected, maybe you feel frustrated, maybe you feel insecure, but hurt is a whole nother thing. Hurt to me
Sure. Yeah.
is an injury. There's an emotional injury there. Somebody
Yeah.
saying that I don't think we're right for each other isn't necessarily an emotional injury. Yeah, it may be a bit of a rejection, but they didn't do anything to really harm you. And
Yeah.
so often we
Yeah.
think, okay, well, I'm really, really hurting here. That's a cognitive distortion. The way that you're
Yeah.
perceiving what happened is not in line with what actually happened.
Yeah, exactly.
you're holding on to it in this
Exactly.
particular way, right? And so
Right.
now,
And yeah, no, I think that's well said, and I love the part that you stressed because I was going to add that as well. It's like what I was bringing up is like the couple of steps after what Brother Reek is saying, which is it gets out of control because there is no, and I don't want to use like this language, but it's like because there's no empirical evidence to what has happened. You're using your emotions to feel and justify the way you are responding.
Justifying it,
and
right.
that is problematic
Yep.
when, like Brother Reek is saying, when you're probably not accurate around how you're feeling. So you're claiming that you're hurt, and now you're justifying your actions and how you treat and relate to your partner or whoever through perceived hurt, when in reality, you sure that wasn't sadness?
Right.
You sure that wasn't actual fear, actually? Like, but it's, I'm just hurt. I'm just hurt. I'm just hurt. And I think Brother Reek is saying that end of itself, from a foundational standpoint, that's why I flagged emotional reasoning, because a lot of us do that. Like, but there are people who just do it all the time.
With
and
everything.
so we're flagging it because to bring it back to forgiveness, that if you, and again, this is why emotional intelligence, that's why we had a whole series a couple of seasons ago. We did a whole series on emotional intelligence, because by increasing your emotional intelligence, you reduce the likelihood of engaging in emotional reasoning, because you're far confident, you're far more accurate around how you're feeling, you're able to regulate, and that ties into things such as forgiveness, right? Because you have that sharper IQ around how you're feeling, so the descriptors you use allow you to communicate far more effectively, precisely, and actually allow your needs in the process of forgiving to make ask of your partner. But when everything is a hurt, and then you fall into that where everything is a hurt, and I'm going to treat it like everything is a hurt, and again, I'm not playing. Like, people with emotional reasoning take it a step further, as I alluded to, is it's not about them dealing with their own emotions. It's about, well, you got to fix it now.
Right.
That's problematic.
Right. Yeah. And
right?
and that's
like another good reason I'll use in the context is like, it sounds rough, but it's true. We talked about this, like infidelity. It's like, okay, yeah, you got cheating on. It's not fun. That sucks. Like, it's horrible. It's one of the biggest injuries and violations you could ever. And so we're going to hold that person accountable. I tell my cousin, we're going to hold him accountable. But at some point, it's contextually, there are things going on in this relationship that involve your actions or lack of actions that help precipitate this. But they're the one. All right, it's your hurt fueling you right now, and probably other emotions. But because you're so hurt, you're not seeing, and that's why we're here. You're not seeing that, for better or for worse, relationally, you contributed to this systemic issue playing out. Of it. Now, tell me I'm wrong, bro.
Dude,
come on now.
I can't.
That's a fair example.
Doc,
come on now.
I can't tell you how often I'm like, look, I'm not trying to victim shame you, but I want you to understand.
Of course,
you played a role in this. Not saying that you took your partner and made them do what they were going to do.
Absolutely,
but you played a role in the foundation of this relationship, and why it's a little shaky. Why it's even possible that your mate, again, not saying it's your fault, but what contributed to, what's the environment in your relationship that caused your mate to even decide to step out there, whether physically, emotionally, whatever.
Right.
Right. So you played a role there.
Exactly. And the great thing about it, like in tying back to forgiveness, I've noticed over the years, doing this all the years, that clients who don't struggle with emotional reasoning, especially in the context of infidelity, I'm not saying it's the only factor, but just kind of honing it in right now. Folks who don't struggle with emotional reasoning in a process such as like recovering from infidelity, they recover faster, and quicker, and more efficiently. Tell me I'm lying. Because once we make that point that you and I are making, they're like, oh, yes, it was wrong what my partner did. But you know what? Hearing Brother Reek laid out that, from a relational standpoint, I contributed to the hostilities and to some of the issues that were going on that precipitated this. Okay, now let me be intentional. There's that word about forgiving, because you know what? They was wrong. and I
Right.
contributed to this.
Right.
You see how that works, folks?
Yep. It's the
See how that
accountability. I
works?
tell people, look, it's the accountability. Those people who have, again, about infidelity, those people who recognize their role, those who can actually take accountability for the role they played in the state of their relationship, typically get over, I don't want to say
They
get over,
do.
but they get to a place of forgiveness faster.
Faster
They
and
get
more
to it faster.
efficiently.
Right.
More efficiently.
And so what are some of the things that get in the way of people being able to forgive their partner? What are some of those factors? What are some of the issues that you see in session that get in the way, that stop people from being able to progress to a place of forgiveness with their partner?
I think, if I may, I think it goes beyond your partner at times. It's the scar
Okay.
tissue from family of origin, right?
Okay.
If people have been, I was watching something the other day. It was like a movie or a show, and someone had said something to the effect of, someone left this person, and they were just talking about being left in the relationship, and the first thing that came out of their mouth was, you see, like, this isn't surprising because everyone in my life in the past
Abandonment.
has always left me.
That
That to
abandonment.
me, I was like, that's scar tissue right there.
Yep.
So forgiveness, even in that light, and you were talking about breakups earlier, there's nothing wrong with breaking up if it's done appropriately and with humanity and stuff like that. So objectively, it's not bad if the breakup is done well and there is reasons for you to break up. But when there's that, that extra oomph
Mm-hmm.
of, well, you'll hear people be very visceral even in sessions, like, I hate this person. And you're like, whoa. And then what starts to come out is, I've been left before.
Yeah.
I have abandonment issues. And
Yep.
So it's bigger than just this person. It's bigger than that.
Yeah.
Let's talk about that, right? So the scar tissue that some of us have from unresolved family of origin, I think, is one of the core factors as to how and why people really struggle.
Yeah. But real quick, even on top of that, like as you're talking about the abandonment, even just those unresolved issues overall. No, it's
Absolutely.
coming from a family
That's
of origin.
what I mean. Yeah, that's what I mean. Yeah,
but coming from a family of origin where people didn't resolve issues. And so you have a lot of old baggage because things never were solved. And so you've always held on to stuff. And that's one of the things that I've really discovered lately is that you have a lot of people who have never learned to forgive. They've never been put in a place where forgiveness was achievable because there's so many unresolved issues. I've had the opportunity to go and speak to a lot of college students lately. And when I bring up forgiveness, when I talk about emotional regulation, I bring up forgiveness, inevitably there's always several people in the classroom who say, oh, I don't know if I could do that. I don't know if I could do that. Why? Because they've never learned how to forgive. I've had clients sit in session as I break down what it means to forgive and say, you know what?
Yeah.
I don't know if I've ever forgiven anybody in my life. Because what you find is that they've never been given the opportunity or shown how to let things go because things are never resolved. And if you don't feel like things are ever resolved and you keep being triggered, you keep being traumatized by these same actions over and over again, then it's going to be hard for you to ever learn how to let things go and forgive people for what they've done because it keeps happening over and over again. And so now they bring that same kind of thinking, those same kind of feelings, the emotional reasoning into their relationships. And with their partner, only doing things that partners do. No one's perfect. And we're not saying that, every infraction looks like someone being unfaithful or cheating, but you treat every action that you don't like that.
Man. Absolutely.
And so you're holding that against them for everything, and you hold on to it. Not only are you not letting go of it or addressing it correctly in the time that it's happening, now you're deciding to hold on to it. And that's the part that becomes confusing to your mate. It's like, it wasn't that bad. What are you talking about? But no, you never learned how to let things go. So you hold on to everything the same exact way, and it all hurts the same way in your mind because you don't know that there are the feelings that you're experiencing that you're not actually acknowledging.
Yeah.
But that all begins with those family origin issues.
Yeah, that was well said, bro. Yeah, that's spot on.
Yeah, but what else? I think relationally though. Relationally, what can happen that can make it hard for somebody to forgive their mate or get to a place of forgiveness with their mate?
Believe it or not, and it does happen. I've had clients, again, repeated hurts.
Those offenses.
Again, I don't want to make this. I don't want to make this about I don't want to make this about infidelity, but I've dealt with some chronic cheaters in my life as a therapist.
Yeah.
That is a good example when you ask me, why are some people unable to forget? If you're with someone who is constantly hurting you,
Yep.
just objectively, folks, fundamentally, it's going to be really hard for anybody, even the most saved person out there. Lord have mercy. It's
No
too hard.
doubt.
It's
Yeah.
too no, I mean,
Yeah, no,
it's
I'm
too
with
hard.
you. I'm with you 100%.
You feel me?
Yeah.
Like, I have to name this because let's be real, Reek. There's in an ideal world, even the most extreme like infidelity and stuff. But if you keep putting people through constant hurt, please do not come into my therapy room
Right.
talking about, I don't know why they're still not forgiving me. You are chronically and repeatedly injuring them.
Right.
And it's just like any injury we have on our body. That's why people need rest. When you injure yourself, you need rest. And I will tell my clients, you're not giving them rest.
No.
And until they're able to rest,
You keep
once they have the
poking
rest,
that
they're able
wound,
to
that same, you keep putting your finger in that same wound.
You keep picking that scab.
Right.
And then you're coming in and I'm seeing your partner with the scab bleeding and you're looking simple saying, yeah, doc, I don't know why they can't just get over it.
Yep.
So that's the other problem that I have to name because that does happen, bro.
Yeah.
Like it happens.
Yeah.
I'm not saying it happens all the time. And again, it's not just infidelity, but if you just keep, even on the lighter side, if you just keep joking, if your partner says, I don't like these kind of jokes, and then you keep giving these kind of jokes,
Mhm.
and you keep chopping it up to, well, they are a joke, and they know me, they know I have a good heart. But if the person has identified this particular act as hurtful,
Right.
and they haven't even, to Brother Reek's point, and they haven't even had the space to even heal from the first 3 damn jokes, and you on joke number 20,
Yeah.
your joke time is about to be over.
Yep. Yeah. Yeah. I think
So the repeated exposure is problematic.
But even say if you're not doing it over and over again, not to go as far as infidelity, but something as simple as either the jokes or, not cleaning up around the house,
Sure.
keeping up with chores or just the inconsistency of things.
It's a lot of things. Yep.
Recognizing that you being inconsistent, yeah, you may have tried, you may have done it right 9 out of 10 times, but it's that one time that's going to re-trigger your mate.
Absolutely.
Especially if they haven't gotten to a place of forgiveness and they're still trying to work on that. All it takes is one infraction. It might be a minor infraction. It may not even be anything even as close to what you might have done originally. But all it takes is that minor infraction for that, for your mate to be re-triggered. And so now you're starting all over again. So one of the things that gets in the way of people being able to forgive you is your inconsistency. If you're saying that I'm apologetic for what happened, if you're saying that I'm not going to let it happen again, if you're saying that I'm going to change my behavior, I'm going to evolve and be the person that you want me to be, and you fall back, you backslide at all, trust me, it's going to make it that much harder for your mate to forgive you because they don't trust. Trust again. They don't trust that you're going to stay consistent. And if they can't trust you, it's going to be hard for them to say, well, why should I not be angry about this? Because it's going to keep happening. I believe it's going to keep happening. So why am I going to bother forgiving you? But it's that lack of consistency. And I think that's what essentially when we get back to, when we think about forgiveness is also rooted in trust. The reason why I haven't forgiven you is because I still don't trust you.
Absolutely.
So if you want me to get to a place of forgiveness, I have to regain my trust in you, which means you doing the things that you said you're going to do.
Correct.
Right?
Correct. And I love what you said because that then speaks to, as we do as couples therapists, that's why we're always putting it out there to couples. The path of forgiveness is for the person themselves because like that's a existential thing that they have to work out themselves. And what you just said also highlights when we put it out there for couples too. You both have to work on this to really support each other, especially the person who's on the path of forgiveness.
Right.
So you're right. The person who is the partner who committed the act, Brother Reek is right. If anything, I know we're not at the sorry, it's been a while. I know we're not at the noble truths, but a noble truth I do want to say, and I love what Brother Reek said. I'm going to highlight it again. If people are looking for like, hey, what's something I really need to take away? That point Brother Reek said is very helpful if you're the person who's on the opposite end of it. And I love what he said. Just be consistent.
Yeah.
Okay. Be consistent because the consistency adds to the trust. And the person who is healing and trying to forgive, that's a lot of currency that they need to allow themselves the space to start letting it go.
Yeah.
But Brother Reek is right. But if you're going to be inconsistent, you're compromising the other person's ability to trust you and to trust themselves that it's the right thing to do, which is let me intentionally let this go.
Yeah.
The inconsistency will really, really bother you. So that, to be honest, Brother Reek, I really appreciate you highlighting that. And again, like, I know we're not the noble truths yet, but that has to be, to me, one of the most critical takeaways, because what's underlying the path of forgiveness, especially in relationships, is trust. And how we can get that is consistency.
Yeah.
Well said, bro. I can't really say anything to that, honestly.
But I ain't done yet. Dr. John. I ain't done. I got one more on the other side of that.
Yeah.
For those people who have reached a level of consistency where you believe that forgiveness should be guaranteed, what's happening that you're still not being forgiven? Well, this goes back to the other person who needs to forgive. Oftentimes, we create these narratives around what the person's behavior was that we continue to define them by that. We no longer see them as them just being them. We see them as whatever the thing is. So you cheated on me, so now you're a cheater. You're forever a cheater. I have not gotten past that narrative of that I created about you and your behavior for me to begin to forgive you. Because now when I see, that's all I see, right? So now as we start to talk about how do you actually get to a place of forgiveness, let me just start off by saying you have to begin to change the narrative around what happened to get to that place, right? What do you think?
No, I think that's well said, because we see that all the time, especially in couples. We do the narrative, and I like what you said, because look, shifting the narrative about your partner is very dangerous, because what Brother Rick is saying is it makes it harder to forgive. It's one of the reasons how it is harder, because the act is now the person themselves. You are a jokester. You never take anything seriously. You are a liar. You are a cheater.
Right.
And I always have to let people know who start shifting the narratives. I say, again, not dismissing, but you bring up a good point. And I really try to scale people back while they're hurting and on their path of forgiveness, of saying, hey, think about this. Was there ever a point in your life at one point where you hurt someone, where you did something wrong?
True.
And if you go back to that place, how would you feel that, even if it was years ago or last week, how would you feel if that person who you hurt, whether intentionally or unintentionally, they came back and they ascribed that as your narrative? Be honest. How would you feel? So what Brother Reek is bringing up is what I also try to push the person who is on their path of forgiveness, of understanding that narrative shift is so dangerous.
Yeah.
And I'm not about to be super socio-political here.
Right.
But even on a global scale, I know I got to go there, brother. You open the door. But the reality of the situation is look, folks, the minute we shift the narrative about who people are based on their actions solely, knowing that, to Brother Reek's point, you're not perfect. You know what the scariest thing history, U.S. history and world history has taught us?
What's that?
That's where we start to dehumanize people and mistreat people and cause not just basic harm, some of the most atrocities. So we got to be very careful here. So I appreciate Brother Reek bringing it, and I don't mean to get socio-political both nationally and globally, but I need to emphasize that deep down, if you don't want people to take your transgressions, your actions, whether intentional or unintentional, and allow that to be the narrative of who you are, there has to be some compassion here. Not full on, like, let them get off the hook. There got to be some level of compassion here, because that's what makes humanity very tricky. Because if you don't want your narrative to shift based on things that you've done, for better or for worse, you have to be open, at least be open and curious, not to do that to your partner. And if you can't, then we have to talk about ending the relationship.
Exactly. Next moves, right? Next moves. You know, the thing I think about too is that people often struggle with forgiveness because, again, there's no resolution, right? I mentioned that about the family of origins, but even with your mate, if you are in a place where you guys have not come to resolution about certain issues, there's no way I can let it go. I'm going to hold on to it until there is some kind of resolution. So when we think about what gets in the way of finding or getting to a place of forgiveness, part of it is not being resolution around whatever the issue is. But then to actually forgive, when there is resolution, that's the part that you have to start letting go of. Whatever that issue is, if you guys have gotten to a place of resolution, you guys start letting go. And a lot of people just want to hold on to things. Like even with their friends, your friends apologize. They said they're not going to do it again, but you can't forgive. And that's problematic.
And they haven't done it again.
Right. And so you just keep holding on to that, right? And we're not saying that once you get to a place of forgiveness, that number one, that you're going to forget, but also it's important for you to create new boundaries around whatever that issue is until you feel safe enough to fully trust them again. Because again, it comes back to trust. So it's okay. You need to get to that place of forgiveness. You need to get to that place of, where you are, again, trusting the person, but create the proper boundaries in order for that to happen. It's a process. It's a process that we all recognize, that we all have to go through. So take the time to do it. Look, Dr. John, we got to wrap it up, man. So you mentioned Noble Truth a few minutes ago. Please give our listeners your Noble Truth for this week.
Yeah, like I said, two of them come up. I'm just going to reemphasize the consistency. If people are asking, how can I help my partner on their journey, on their path of forgiveness, especially if it's something that you've done, be consistent. Figure out what are the needs or what are some of the changes, and try to commit to being consistent around those. That really assists. The second thing that I'll say as well, because it really elicited something for me when I think about clients in the past. For the person who's on the path of forgiveness, especially in the context of your relationship, try to be as compassionate during that. Be compassionate to yourself, be compassionate to the other person, because at the end of the day, the shoe is on the other foot. Deep down, you'd want that as well.
That's true. That's for
Those
sure.
are my noble truth.
That's for sure. And my noble truth for this week is, again, you need to make sure that you are properly classifying what your emotions are. Everything isn't hurt. You aren't that deeply injured that it is that hard to forgive somebody. Many times what you're feeling is disappointment. It may be rejection. It could be any other number of feelings that you're experiencing. But if you classify everything as hurt and you're experiencing everything the exact same way, you're never going to be able to get to a place of forgiveness, because those things are so much more intense. But every situation isn't that same way. Recognize the difference between actually being hurt or just being disappointed. So you can classify it right. You can compartmentalize what happened in your mind correctly, so that you're not emotional reasoning and you're not making this a much bigger issue than it is, so that it becomes an easier path to forgiveness. That's what you have to think about. So that's what I got for us people to get to a better place around forgiveness. And as we head on out of here, Dr. John, great show. Glad to have you back, man. Why don't you let everybody know where they can find out more about you?
Feel free to just type in Dr. John Hart. A lot of different things are going to pop up clinically. Feel free to reach out and check out the Relationship Counseling Center of Maryland. It's RCC Maryland, spell out the Maryland.com. You can also find the amazing work I'm doing at the Beer Institute of Justice, doing a lot of great work around race equity, criminal justice reform, trying to hit the impacts of the communities in multiple ways. And please come show some love at our kingsoftheheart.com website. We're updating it. It's going to be an exciting year. We have a lot that Brother Reek and I are planning. So please, if you have any questions, if you want us to come give a talk or, do any kind of consultation, feel free to reach out. We're here for the community. So come check us out, and always check out our podcast. We're on all the major streaming platforms. We update it after every show. So always show some love that way. So appreciate y'all. Brother Reek, where can we find you, bro?
Well, like Dr. John said, you can find me right here at kingsoftheheart.com. You can find us streaming on all the different platforms, again, like Dr. John said. Also recognize that, hey, most Fridays we are taping live. So if you want to be part of the conversation, hop into the chat. Make sure you go to our YouTube page, Kings of the Heart Podcast, and you can check us out live on Fridays. More about me, go to my website, insightmft.com, to find out more about my private practice. And like Dr. John also said, just go on to Google, any of the different search engines, put in Tariiq Omari Walton, all these things pop up. You can find out more about me through all those different channels. So that's what it is, Dr. John. Brother, good to see you. And
it's so good to see you. Glad to be back. Excited for the ride ahead, man.
Yeah, man.
Appreciate you. Homie. I love you, brother.
Yeah, we love you too, brother. To everybody said what's up, and listeners, you guys take care. Peace.
Peace.